You've probably heard your fair share of stories about normal people who live normal lives. I always considered myself one of those people, even if my life wasn't entirely ordinary. I was born dead, but only briefly since the doctors managed to revive me. Before you ask, no, I don't remember anything. I didn't get a glimpse of heaven or grow up with a certain emptiness. Silly question. I grew up healthy, rarely ever getting sick, but my bones were seemingly brittle, like of birds, and I often wore casts. I knew pain from a young age, as well as isolation. I was an only child. Apparently I was supposed to have a twin, but I just absorbed him in the womb, or whatever. Still, my parents were nice to me, but not to each other. I'd often wake up in the middle of the night to doors slamming and yelled profanities. By 6 years old, I had 2 Christmases, 2 homes, and got twice the birthday presents. I never resented them for their divorce. In fact, I encouraged it. A home of harbored resentment, hatred, and despair isn't good for anyone's mental health, you know? Since I had no siblings or cousins or any other known family, I had to find ways to entertain myself. Sometimes the archaic video games we had at the time of my childhood just wouldn't cut it. So I'd go to our local library. It was as mundane as you would expect, with rows and rows of dusting books and fluorescent lights that were harsh to the eye. But those dusting books could easily transport me elsewhere, where I could be anyone I wanted and live anything I always desired. During the summer, the library was my go-to spot every day, but I was only able to go during the weekends when I was in school. This continued until I graduated high school. I moved away for college and it took up all my time, so I rarely ever got the chance to do my leisure reading. Instead, I actually made some friends. I also met a girl, and not just any girl, but the girl of my life, Justine. I fell in love with her hard. So much so that twice I asked her to marry me. But we were young and she wasn't ready. It didn't matter though. I was willing to wait for her as long as it took. Every single event in my life, no matter how mundane or vaguely odd, led me to who I am today. The librarian. Yes, I am aware of how boring that sounds. How normal. But the real excitement in my life didn't start until I died, for the second time. You may wonder how the hell I'm posting this if I'm dead, and, well, fine, I don't have an answer for you on that one. Because I don't know. Everything after that 18-wheeler completely obliterated my car has been confusing as hell. But anyhow, I'm getting off track here. The library I work at isn't like the library I frequented growing up. It isn't like any library anyone knows, actually. It is a library of all existing knowledge. Now, you may scoff and think me a rambling lunatic, which is understandable. But I can assure you, I am 100% sane. Or, well, 99.9%. Who the hell is this guy and who does he think he is? Your thoughts might continue, and rightfully so. My real name doesn't matter. It was swallowed by the library along with all the events of my life. You can call me Leaf, though. It's Scandinavian, apparently, and pretty dope. As for the latter, I am nothing but a humble librarian. And where exactly is this library of all existing knowledge? Boy, you sure are full of questions. Lucky for you, I have the answers for them. The answer to this particular one is nowhere. Not in any map, not in any country, not in any town, website, database, or safe house. Nada. The library is its own entity. It exists on a different plane, adjacent to the human plane. Often it interacts with it, but remains invisible, like a predator hiding in plain sight. If you're wondering, which you probably are, I am still human. The library sadly did not give me any magical powers. How I got to work here? Well, it was probably right after my second death. I had to give up my life to get this job, even if I didn't know about it. Like the first time, I didn't see a light at the end of the tunnel. As my body was crushed and my organs just exploded everywhere in the car accident, it was all darkness, until I suddenly woke up in what seemed to be a reading area, laying on the couch with a quilt covering me, just as if I had been taking a nap. This reading room was lavishly decorated, with expensive-looking furniture and tapestries that seemed to be from places I had never visited. There were marble statues, not just of people, but of other things I couldn't explain. Books, ranging from old to new, were scattered all around, some in a neat pile and others haphazardly thrown. All decoration clashed, not following a particular theme. I knew I would remember being in this place before, but everything was new and confusing, so there was no way I'd know it. As I got up, I heard a loud groan, like the kind you hear in old houses with bad pipe systems. At the same time, the lights flickered some, and the entire building shook slightly. I stood there, motionless, as an eerie feeling overcame me. Then everything returned to a deafening silence, the likes of which I had never known. I couldn't remember what happened or how I'd gotten there. Hell, I couldn't even remember who I was. What I did know was that I had to leave, even if I didn't feel an overpowering urge to. For some reason, I felt welcome. Dare I say, at home. I left the room through an impossibly tall, intricately carved mahogany door. What was outside surprised me even more than the reading room. The foyer, if it could be called that, was massive, lit by an enormous skylight way up above. At least that's what I thought it was. There were so many floors that I couldn't even count them. There were white marble pillars and more statues, except these were jade. Several archways led in many different directions. The marble floor beneath my feet was the kind that had patterns that, if you stared long enough at them, would take different shapes. I noticed the patterns moved, almost imperceptibly at first, but then more obviously, as if it knew I was watching. The entire place kind of reminded me of Raphael's School of Athens. Nearby, there was a simple, very plain-looking desk, which was an eyesore compared to the rest of the place. On the desk, there was a folded note, next to a strange feather and an inkpot, and an empty nameplate. Curiosity got the best of me, so I looked at what was written on the note. Name redacted, 112th floor, Section 37-6G. Shelved May 30th, 2007 at 4:47 a.m. I didn't recognize the name, but for some reason it felt vaguely familiar. I noticed on the wall behind the desk there was a very old phone, like from 1910. Again, it seemed out of place. I grabbed the earpiece and, after a moment of contemplation, spoke the contents of the note into the receiver. At first, nothing happened, and I was mildly disappointed. Then, in the blink of an eye, I found myself in a completely different room. Well, if it could be called a room. I was in what seemed to be a dark void, illuminated by bright floating lights. Around me there were rows and rows of bookshelves, all different in style and size. I could not see an end to the room, and I was too afraid of getting lost to explore around. I noticed the light in the bookshelf in front of me had a red hue, and a slightly tattered book flew down from the top of the shelf. It was a bright orange, and had the same name I'd seen before on the cover. Upon opening it, I saw a picture of myself on the very first page. Aha, so that name was mine. I couldn't believe how plain it sounded. Leaf is much better. Once more, I couldn't contain my curiosity. This book had to be important. I had been led to it for a reason. I flipped through it quickly and confirmed my suspicions. It contained dates and several events of my everyday life. It felt strange, private, but the stranger was me. I had to relearn who I was. There was another phone on the wall, this time a canary yellow rotary phone from the 60s. This time I was transported back to the reading room. I spent God knows how long reading about my life, reliving memories that I thought had been erased from my mind. The more I read, the more of my identity I regained. I felt more like a human than a ghost, once again. Once I read about my death, everything made sense, but the next couple of entries made me feel a mixed set of emotions. I learned the name of the place first, the Library of All Existing Knowledge. No further information whatsoever. It felt impossible to be there, like maybe I was in a fever dream. How was it possible to keep so much information in one place? I was about to close the book when, suddenly, more words appeared at the bottom of the page. Redacted becomes the librarian and sole caretaker of the library. The whole structure shook again, and I heard many things move around. The sound coming from all over, like the library was rearranging itself. As I exited the room, I found a large, ancient-looking book with yellowing pages akin to parchment. It was a record of every single book in the entire library. It lived up to its name. The books ranged from people to math equations to things I didn't even know existed. Of course, I was most interested to research people first. My family wasn't the first thing I looked up, but famous people throughout history. First, it was Albert Einstein, who I never knew much about. Then it was Adolf Hitler. Did you know he sucked his thumb to keep his fear of the dark at bay until he was 15? What an idiot! When I read about Vikings and Norse mythology, I found my new name, which you already know. It made me seem so much cooler than my old name. I might be a librarian, but I have to keep up my appearances, you know? It's safe to say that my reading habit had returned in full swing. I read all the time, which is a strange phrase for me to say. You see, time doesn't really seem to exist in this place. It's perpetually daytime, or so I think, since the light always remains the same, but I have not been able to find an outside area. There are no clocks anywhere, not that I think they're necessary. I've done my research in time, though, so I know that in the human realm it has been a couple of years. 2019 now. Wow. When I finally got to read about my family, I discovered a few unpleasant things that I'd been better off not knowing. My parents had thought of aborting me, since my mom got knocked up at only 17 years old. They tried to have more kids after me, but no such luck. Mom got ovarian cancer months before my accident, but decided to keep it a secret. My dad had another family before my parents even got divorced. I learned pretty quickly that not everything was roses in this place. I found a lot of things, horrible things that I wish I could erase from my memory. People's darkest secrets, animal extinctions, the complete wipeout of an entire race that existed way before humans, war, famine, death. I found out Justine never really loved me. She was in the closet and was using me to hide her true sexuality. My friends cried for me when they found out I died, but one of them, Leia, was secretly very happy. Turns out, she was secretly with Justine. I was angry for a long time, cursing this place and desperately trying to find a way out. I didn't want this job, much less the burden of knowledge. I often wondered why I had been chosen for it. But then the library decided to show me something important. Apparently, I come from a long line of librarians, dating back to eons ago. I'm pretty sure some of my ancestors weren't even fully human. They all vowed to take care of the library and its contents. Somebody had to keep track of things and be careful about who had access to all of this knowledge. I was stuck with this job, and I had no choice. I didn't have children during my life, so I had no one to replace me one day. As much as I hated the idea at the time, I had to get used to this new purpose. But I wasn't sure what it fully entailed. Like I said before, the library isn't ordinary. It needs sustenance. New books arrive often, popping up in my desk at alarming rates, A lot of them had names on the cover. I soon discovered that this library ate people and animals and other things. It was its way of absorbing new data, converting it into books. It ate me too, and by doing so, it took my knowledge of myself, writing it down. With renewed interest, I began to explore the entire place. There were many, many floors, almost an infinite amount, and every one of them held a different category of things. Sometimes, the structure would shake, and things would rearrange themselves. My theory always was that the library had to keep building itself into something bigger and bigger. I can only theorize about the library because, strangely enough, there are no records about it. Everything I know about it I had to discover, like the fact that it is a living being. It was only me and it, coexisting, depending on each other. If the library didn't survive, if it didn't get what it needed, I'm pretty sure it would cease to exist. Myself included. Maybe that's why I'm posting this here. So I can find more people, so I can gather more knowledge. There's still so much that I need to learn, so much that needs to be preserved. I don't necessarily know how the library chooses something to eat, or when it chooses to do so. I only have theories, but I have a suspicion that it is at fault for my accident. I'm not sure what happened to the old librarian, but when they were gone, the library was going to need a new librarian to take charge. It had to speed up the process. I wonder if it does the same thing when it needs sustenance. But what I know for certain, right in this moment, is that I can't wait to read about all of you.